Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for Janek's session, How to Be a High-Performing Sales Leader and Create an Exceptional Team. My name is Sarah McMullen, Chief Marketing Officer here at Janek, and I'm here to introduce our presentation today and set it up a bit for you so you understand what to expect here. First, you're going to hear from Managing Partner Justin Zappulla, and he's going to give us an awesome presentation. I'm really excited about that. Following his presentation, we'll be holding a Q&A. So as you're listening to this presentation, you have questions you're interested in hearing Justin answer. There's more interest in a particular topic, or maybe you have a technical question that you need help with. Drop it right in the bottom. You'll see Q&A there. If you're on mobile, it'll be on a little bit of a separate screen. You'll be able to find it there. I think since the pandemic, most of us are pretty good with Zoom, but if you need help again, drop your your question in that Q&A in the bottom. We'll try to get to those after Justin's presentation, as many of those as we can get to. You will receive a recording following this event, so don't worry about frantically scribbling down notes. You're going to have access to a recording. Look for that in your email tomorrow. So with that, let me introduce Janek Performance Group and Justin. Janek is a leading sales performance company, award-winning, serving thousands of clients worldwide. We are focused on driving results for our clients across industries. Justin Zappulla, he's the managing partner here at Janek. He brings over 20 years of sales experience, sales leadership experience. He's a thought leader in the space and one of the top authorities on sales training and on sales leadership in particular. I'm excited to hear more about his experience, his vast breadth of experience in this area of sales training and sales leadership training. Justin is also the co-author of the popular book, Critical Selling: How Top Performers Accelerate the Sales Process and Close More Deals. Justin, welcome today.
Hi, thanks, Sarah. Thanks for that great introduction.
So glad to have you. With that, I'm going to turn the time over to you.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. And welcome everyone to today's webinar. As Sarah mentioned, I'm super excited to share some key insights on how to be a high-performing sales leader to create an exceptional team. And as Sarah mentioned, I know firsthand the challenges of leading a sales team. I've experienced the high highs and also the low lows. And over the past 18 years in particular, I've been working with sales leaders on how to implement the most effective sales strategies in order to improve performance. So I'm excited to share some of those best practices with you today. And today, I'll cover a sales performance blueprint to help you as a sales leader identify, assess, and improve each of these areas to really create this exceptional team. So again, excited to get started. Thanks so much for joining. Let's go ahead and take a look. So here it is, our sales performance blueprint. In the sales performance blueprint, you'll see 6 pillars that we identified of high performance. And really, to be a great sales leader, you have to understand these critical pillars of running a successful sales operation or running a successful sales team. Now, each of these pillars represent an opportunity for you to inspect and improve. And we'll dive deeper into this webinar in today's session. Within each of these pillars, I'll identify 3 topics, helping you map out an 18-point system that you can put into practice right away. And these are all the critical components of running an exceptional sales team. We've done the research here at Janek to identify what is it that makes top performing sales organizations so successful. And really, it's this blueprint and these 6 pillars, these 18 points are key areas that you can look into, expect, and put something into place to improve right away. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at the first pillar. So the first pillar in the process in the sales performance blueprint is strategy and go-to-market. So this is really the starting point for any sales operation. So your strategy and your sales channel. Let's look there at the first topic. Your sales strategy is simply your game plan. How do you intend to bring the products and services that you offer to the marketplace? And then your sales channel is the path that you'll take to reach your customers. So a few examples of that. If you have a direct sales channel, you might have an inside sales organization, an outside sales organization, account management teams, perhaps business development teams, or even customer success teams. Those are all channels, direct sales channels that your path to bring your product or service to the marketplace, to your customers. But you also have indirect sales channels. So you might have a network of distributors or partners who will in turn sell your product or service to your end customer. And many organizations in today's environment have a hybrid, approach of both of those. That's your first topic within your strategy and go-to-market. It's your strategy, your game plan, and the channel, how you intend to create a path to customers. Next is customer segmentation. So who are your customers? What are their characteristics? How will they buy? And most importantly, why will they buy from you? Clearly understanding your customers and segmenting your customers will enable you to implement an effective sales and marketing approach, knowing who they are, the right messaging at the right time. And we'll get into that a little bit later too as we move along. And then finally, within this strategy and go-to-market pillar, the third topic that you'll look at are the roles. So what are the roles that you have within your organization? You might have business development roles for prospecting, traditional sales roles for opportunity management and closing sales, account management roles for maintaining and growing relationships, or even perhaps technical roles to support the sales process. Especially in B2B sales and more complex sales, these are becoming more common. You might have a technical sales role that needs to come in to do more detailed discovery, or maybe some solution architecting. So as you think about the product and services that you want to sell and you want to bring to the marketplace, what's your strategy, what's your channel, and then what are the roles that you need within that channel in order to have an effective pursuit of customers. So every sales organization has these specific roles in order to increase effectiveness. So let's take a look at the next pillar. So the next pillar, a big topic, is sales process. Okay, so a sales process is a series of steps that a seller can follow to achieve a desired outcome. Now, a good sales process should include a couple things. One, it should certainly have the steps and the definition of those steps, but it should also continue to identify additional things that enable the sellers to be successful. Like, what are the skills that are required for this step? Or what are the resources that you can use within this step to get the outcome? And of course, getting to an outcome, you need to measure that. So you got your KPIs and your metrics. But having a sales process is a disciplined way of approaching sales, but it's also a way of breaking down the sales approach to smaller steps. So you can really get focused on what are the little things that you need to get right to be successful at each step of the sales process. Now, for most organizations, we see three very common sales processes. And here are the topics that are on the screen. So the first is your lead generation process. Now, this process defines the steps of finding new prospects and putting them into the pipeline. So an outcome of a lead generation process, or also known as a business development process, is not necessarily a closed sale, but it will be an exception of an initial meeting, or perhaps having that initial meeting take place will be the end of that process. But ultimately, how are you finding new customers, new prospects to put them into the pipeline? That's a lead generation process that you'll define. Now, next, you might need to look at your opportunity management process. And this is really your traditional sales process of managing deals throughout the pipeline. So common stages in this process include qualification, discovery, presenting solutions, closing, negotiating, etc. That's really managing the process through to winning that opportunity or winning that relationship. And then the third process that you'll look at is account management. So how are you maintaining those relationships to ensure that you retain, your level of business, but also growing that business? So what are the process? What are the steps? How do you do that to really maximize those relationships? And there could be other processes too, but these are really the three. These need to be defined to have a disciplined approach. You don't want everybody in the organization doing something different. You want to be able to establish the best practices and know what's the most effective pursuit of customers. What are the skills that the reps should be using at that time? What resources are enabling them? That's what that sales process is defined around. Okay, so let's take a look at the next pillar. The next pillar is talent and motivation. So here, this ensures that you have the right people in the right roles and they're motivated to do their job. Okay, so there's a few things that you need to look at here. First is your selection process, right? So this is your hiring process. Do you clearly understand the role you're hiring for and what competencies would be required to make them successful? We all know the cost of a failed salesperson is high, so this process, it's worth the effort to inspect. And a good best practice here is there's many assessment tools out in the marketplace that you can use to assist you in your hiring process. Hiring, you can always look at their background, you do interviewing, maybe some behavioral based interviewing, or maybe do some scenarios to see skills. But there's some scientifically validated assessments in the marketplace that we offer one here at Janik, but we encourage a lot of our customers to do as an additional data point to the hiring process. So what you can do is you can set up a benchmark against your high performers, and then you can assess people against that benchmark. So that way you're hiring people that look like people that are successful in a given role. So again, this could be another data point to add into your process, could be really helpful. But ultimately, we need to make sure that we're recruiting great talent and we're selecting the right people for the right roles so that way they have success. Now, next is compensation. How am I paying the people that I hire? And there's probably two most important factors here. One, certainly the compensation needs to be competitive to that role. If we're going to attract talent and keep talent, compensation certainly has to be competitive. But another aspect of this, and probably where we work mostly with our clients, is the comp plan aligned to the business goals? And this is where we see a lot of misalignment, a lot of improvement for redesigning comp plans to drive performance. Now, we'll talk with many sales leaders, and they're intimately familiar with the goals or the things that they want to accomplish. So we'll have conversations like, okay, what's most important this year? What are you focused on? And sales leaders will share, really just an account growth perhaps is one of our most important goals, followed by deal profitability or perhaps average deal size, cross-selling, things like that. Well, then we'll go to the comp plan. We'll look at comp plan and we'll say, okay, how are you rewarding people for achieving sales? And we'll see a comp plan that's based on a percentage of revenue, right? So there's a missed opportunity there to really tailor comp plans designed towards the objectives and the things that you would like those people to do, because typically people do what they're rewarded for. And then finally, within this pillar of talent and motivation is a talent audit. So talent audits really help you figure out, do you have the right people in the right role? So as an example, are your hunters hunting, right? Are your farmers farming, things like that. But secondly, it can take a deeper look at people. And again, an assessment product's really helpful here, but it can take a deeper look and look at where are the strengths and opportunities within my team and within the individuals. So that way, as a sales leader, you can direct your managers to do some coaching and development in these critical areas. So doing talent audits every so often to really figure out where are the institutional capabilities and skill sets within my organization, and what are some of the things I want to put in place to really drive performance, can be a really helpful tool. Okay, let's take a look at the next pillar. So here we're looking at sales performance and development. Now, this ensures you're tracking the right things and you're constantly working with the sales team to improve performance and win at a high level. And while all the pillars are important and have importance, this one in particular is vital. So I'll cover a couple of topics here. So the first topic is KPIs and success metrics. What are the KPIs and success metrics of the teams and the specific roles within those teams? And I would say, as we work with sales leaders, most sales leaders have some metrics in place. However, I find many sales organizations are not tracking the right metrics. This especially comes true with, leading indicators. We see those get lost a bit. So we see a lot of organizations when they're tracking lagging indicators and looking at outcomes. So closed sales, number of new customers, average deal size, things like that. But in addition to that, you want to look at some leading indicators. And the reason why leading indicators are so important is because these are measurement points that you can look at before a sale happens. Why that's important is because you can do something about it. After the outcome already happens, you can always only look backwards and change things moving forward. But if you're tracking some of the leading indicators, this is real-time data that you can look at and have some interventions to win deals that are in the pipeline now. We see a lot of organizations, there's a great opportunity to really start tracking and managing to some of these leading indicators. So an example of this is sales activity or even ratios between sales stage. That's probably one of the most popular. So looking at pitches to opportunities, or needs to a presentation, or presentation to a proposal to a close. So each of the ratio going from one stage to the next can be a great leading indicator, and measuring that and managing to that at a team level and at an individual level can be quite valuable. And then finally, the next topic is training. So training, do you have the right training in place to help your sales team win? What does your onboarding look like? Are you providing the right training to get people onboarded and up to speed and fully producing as quickly as possible? And of course, this has a lot to do with retention. As we all know, if sales reps don't see success early on, then they're likely to leave, right? And to move on to something else. So we want to give ourselves the best opportunity for that, give them some great training, some onboarding, and ensure we're able to onboard them and get them producing as quickly as possible. And I challenge sales organizations, are you providing training beyond process, systems, and product? A lot of sales training that we look at, those are the topics inside of sales training. But really, sales training needs to be more developmental. Do you understand the competencies that are critical to that role? And are you providing some skills training? Are you able to develop and improve skills over the long term in order to improve performance? And this is one of those key areas that can really drive performance. And one of the key areas that we see as a difference between average performing sales organizations and high performing is somebody that really has their hands wrapped around a good training and development plan. And then finally, here is coaching practice. So do you have a culture of coaching within the organization? Are the managers, your frontline managers, do they have the time to coach? Number one. Two, do they have the skills to be able to do that? And is there an acceptance of coaching within the organization? Another really important trait of high-performing sales organizations. We want people to have that growth kind of mindset, that they can always be better and they're always looking to improve their skills. And coaching shouldn't be viewed as a reaction to poor performance. It's quite the opposite. Coaching is something that high-performing organizations do and do often. So sales reps are comfortable with listening to their calls, getting advice from peers, listening to their managers, and continuing to develop. So having that true culture around coaching and development is certainly something really important, an important factor that sales leaders need to get in place for high-performing sales teams. All right, let's take a look at the next metric. Our next pillar of high performance is customer attributes. So this pillar is all about the customer, ensuring that you know who they are, what they need, when they need it, and how they'll buy and why they'll buy. So the first topic here is customer journey. Okay, do you know how your customers become aware of their needs or become aware of a problem? How does that happen? How do they research solutions? What's the process? Where are the sources that they go for that? How do they evaluate options? How do they make purchasing decisions? So this is also known as the buying process. This is different from the sales process. And sales leaders who better understand this preferred customer journey are in a much stronger position to implement effective sales and marketing approaches. And in fact, just tying back to something I covered earlier around sales process, whenever we do sales process design here at Janik, the first thing we start with is this, the customer journey, right? Because the best sales processes are designed around customer preferences, right? How do customers want to buy? If you create this frictionless experience for customers, they're more likely to like that and want to move on to the next step. So a customer journey really is the underpinning for any successful sales process. And the better and the deeper you understand that, the better that you'll be able to implement a process that will win over the competition. Now, the second topic in customer attributes is customer personas. So defining specific personas is an essential component of any high-performing sales team, and each of your call points or target customers need to be clearly defined. So this includes a few things. A well-developed persona are things like demographics. What are all the demographics of this particular person? That can include location, age, perhaps role, industry, department, things like that are all examples of demographics. But then beyond that, what are the interests or goals of this customer persona? What are their needs? What are their challenges? What are the risks and things they want to avoid? And having these well-built personas, again, for all of your call points is good for a couple things. One, marketing can now use that to develop the right collateral, the right messaging. But even for your sales team, it's a lot easier to sell to somebody when you really understand who they are. This can inform the questions that you ask, right? The information that you share and when. How detailed that information is can all be related back to the persona to ensure that you're really delivering that unique and valuable sales approach. So having this within the sales team and having this defined is really important. And then lastly, for customer attributes, we look at value proposition. So here you'll articulate why your customers should do business with you. And again, this links back to customer personas because you can have a unique value proposition for each role. So this links directly back to that. Let's take a look at the next pillar. So our next pillar, and really our last pillar in the blueprint, is tech enablement. So here we're going to explore what technology you're leveraging to really enable the success of your sales team. This is also known as your tech stack. So the first, we start fundamentals, kind of base level, is your CRM and your data management. Do you have a CRM that enables your sales team to do a better job and provide the data that you need? You know, in today's environment, I find most sales organizations have some level of CRM in place. However, optimizing that CRM to deliver and track the right information at the right time is a whole different story. You know, we'll see CRMs many times are used just for sales leaders to get the data that they need. And salespeople spend a lot of time going through the steps, clicking the boxes, adding the information that they need. So one, you want to look at your CRM to reduce that admin time. You know, try to automate as many things as you can. If you have information from other databases, pull that in. Put the tools that salespeople use right into the CRM, so that way it's less clicks and it's just less time serving the system. But the other lens that you should look at your CRM through is from an enablement perspective. So a CRM can deliver information to salespeople at the right time. So when they're at this stage, at this process, we have sales tools that are in there, discovery guides for asking the right questions, messaging for customer personas, collateral can be put in, and even training. Putting in training at the right time so that way when they're faced with challenges or scenarios, they can click right there and get the training that they need. So CRMs over the years have grown exponentially in terms of their capabilities. There's a lot of connectors to this, but I encourage organizations when you implement a CRM to not just look at the data side of things and get the reporting and statistics that you want, but to also to look at the enablement side of things as well. Next are customer engagement tools. So this looks at various technology solutions you can use to better engage the customer during the sales process. So a couple of these, few examples of these include email messaging tools, proposal builders or pricing tools, call listening software, video messaging tools, and more. So, and again, over the years, as technology advances, there's many options here that you can add into your tech stack to look at engaging the customer at the right time to support sales in their pursuit of customers and building relationships and closing deals. And then lastly is content management. Content and sales collateral can be a huge differentiator for any sales organization. And while most teams have basic information on the products and services and companies that they represent, dynamic content systems go a lot further. And it really just looks at how do you get the right information in the hands of sellers at the right time. And again, there's many solutions that can help with this, and I'll give you a few examples. But many organizations are producing lots of collateral these days. So you got lots of product sheets, but you got case studies and stories, and even salespeople. They're creating decks that they're using to present with customers. Well, effective content management systems can organize all that information and start to present that to the sellers at the right time. And many of them even are using predictive analytics or even AI to look at, okay, what are the deals that we won? What's the collateral that we used at the various stages for deals that we won? And if other opportunities pop up like that, I'm going to recommend that kind of content. So recommend a case study that was used for a similar client and or a deck another sales rep used that resulted in a win sale. And that analytics can learn over time and become even more and more predictive. So especially for more B2B sales and more complex sales, this can be a real valuable asset to add into your tech stack to enable your sales team. All right, so let's do a quick review. The sales performance blueprint has 6 pillars. Okay, strategy and go-to-market, which is all about your game plan, your channels, the roles that you enable within your sales organization. 2 is sales process, right? Do you have well-defined sales processes? Do they have resources and enablement tools built into them so that way sellers can be disciplined about sales and follow a predictive model, follow a model that's proven to work, and have that integrated ideally into your technology. Next, you look at talent and motivation. Are you hiring the right people? Do you have the right people in the right roles? And is your compensation designed to really drive performance, to be motivating and to drive the type of outcomes as a sales leader that you're looking for? Next was sales performance and development. Do you have the right training plan? Do you have a coaching culture in place? And are you delivering that information in order to drive the right KPIs? And are you tracking those KPIs within the system? Next, you had customer attributes, all about the customer, knowing the customer deeply, understanding the customer journey, creating those personas, and really defining and perhaps clarifying that value proposition so that way your messaging is tight for marketing as well as sales so they can bounce off of that. And then finally is tech enablement. Are you leveraging the great technology today to enable your sales team to be successful, from CRM to customer engagement tools and even content management systems? Okay, so these 6 pillars give you a blueprint to focus on as a sales leader. We have 3 topics within each of those pillars, creating an 18-point system for you to become a high-performing leader and create an exceptional team. So that's a wrap for today's content of today's webinar. So thank you, everyone who joined. Sarah, I'll turn it over back to you as we can answer some questions for the audience.
Fantastic, Justin. We actually got a lot of really great questions, so I hope we'll be able to get through. We'll be able to get through a lot of them. In the chat, if we don't get to your question, just let us know and we can follow up with you on any additional questions you may have. So Justin, I'm going to start with a question from Aaron Margulies. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Aaron asks, what is your view on sales leaders and managers also taking on their own accounts?
Yeah, it's a great question. A lot of organizations do have this role of player coach. And while I won't say that that's never appropriate, there are times where that might be appropriate. But mostly we find high performing sales organizations, especially when you get to a certain size, that managers are really focused on managing and developing people. And even one of the common pitfalls, I'll say, of managers is people jumping in and doing their job for them. I go back to what I talked about earlier, really developing that culture of coaching is what's most important. So having a role that's just designed for that. I mean, in a sense, sales managers, sales leaders, the goal is to be a sales force multiplier, right? So if you're a part of your job at least is a rep, then it limits your ability to do that. But I do know, as organizations scale, you might need to have that player coach role to some extent. But I would encourage organizations as they scale and as they get to a certain size that they remove those selling responsibilities from managers and leaders.
Okay. Next question from Linda Sharp. Linda asks, do you have processes for forecast confidence or profit? And how do you quantify those? Any KPIs you would suggest?
Yeah, definitely. Well, first, thanks for your question, of course. First of all, every organization is going to be different here, right, in terms of the KPIs that they're tracking. But as they go through pipeline and getting predictive on pipeline, the importance there is really having a well-defined sales process and then tracking at each stage, right? So there are some clear characteristics of a sales opportunity to be at this stage. And you also know that there's some clear things that need to happen in order to exit that stage, right? Or to close that gate. And if you're really disciplined around that, now you can start to look at assigning percentages to each of those stages, right? And you will need to calibrate this over time, but over time, you'll look at this and you'll be able to, not that long, really start to really narrow this down and know, okay, when I have deals at stage 1, that's a 12% likelihood of close, right? And then when they move to stage 2, they're 27% likelihood of close. So you look at your pipeline, you look at the opportunity, you apply that percentage within that stage in order to predict, your pipeline.
All right, thanks, Linda. I hope that's helpful to help answer your question. So another question we got from Steve Jin during the point at which you were talking about sales compensation. A lot of questions around sales compensation. We hear those a lot at Janik. His question is, we are in the higher education industry where the federal government has instituted inducement laws where we can't compensate our salespeople based on performance, including bonuses. What are your recommendations for rewarding sales reps?
Yeah, great question. I've actually had some experience with this before, not particular in higher education, but even other industries that have regulations around sales. So certainly in some industries, we recognize that you can't incentivize people, at least monetarily, for sales. And it sounds like this is your case as well. I encourage you to think of other methods for reward and recognition. At the end of the day, people aren't only motivated by money and achieving a sale, but what are some of the things that you would like to have happen during the sales process? And it might be just leaderboards and rewards, that way by communicating those kind of things. And, I don't want to suggest any sort of, every industry is going to have, there's certain rules around what can be compensated or not. So obviously you can't cross those lines, but we want to have reps identify needs, or we want to have great presentations to deliver information appropriately. Ultimately, what are the things that that are going to lead to good outcomes, and you can reward and recognize, and perhaps it's more of a recognition route in this case, for those behaviors that are likely to produce good outcomes.
All right, Steve, I hope that's helpful to you. Next question. If you were taking over a new sales team that needs a lot of this type of support and direction, which pillar would you start with?
I would start with, there's a few things. It depends how deep you want to go, but obviously there's a few things you have to get right. Strategy and your go-to-market, that has to be set. So you have to have a strategy. You have to have roles in place. You have to know how you're going to go to market. So I guess perhaps that one's kind of a given, that you at least have that bone or structure in order to have a sales business. Beyond that, I'd go right into sales process and development. Really looking at, you want to create discipline around sales. You don't want to hire people and just have them doing, everything that they feel is right. So creating some discipline around sales process, and then immediately putting training and coaching in place so you can learn and make your adjustments, develop a team. That's where I'd spend my time to start.
Okay. John Romero asks, he starts with a statement: culture of coaching, amazing mindset. I've never heard that in over 15 years. John asks, what are some best practices to create that coaching culture?
Yeah, great question. One, I think you have to create a safety around coaching, right? That's probably the most important thing. You want reps and anybody to feel comfortable that they can be vulnerable, right? That we can discuss missteps, opportunities, things that they didn't do right, let's say on a sales call. Even a lot of sales calls in today's environment are recorded, whether that's phone calls recorded or even in web sessions like this are recording. And it's interesting because we have some organizations that are paralyzed when we talk about playing those calls right in front of the team to do some developmental coaching. And I have other organizations that have really adopted and embraced this coaching culture. And that is completely normal. We all get on a call together, and, it's an opportunity for us to practice and get better. And there's an acceptance of that. So I think creating safety within the organization, and also leadership showing that you're willing to do the same, starts to create that coaching culture. And the other thing you need to do is you need to do it. Obviously, you have to make time for these coaching sessions. Many organizations, when we look at frontline sales leaders, they're directing, right? They're directing their teams what to do and how to do it and what they should do next. But there has to be time carved out for not just directing, for developing. So make sure you carve out the time, create that safety, and make it okay to work together as a team.
Speaking of working together as a team, we had another attendee ask, what are your thoughts on establishing team leads for top producers?
Yeah, I really like the role of team leads. One of the things that we like to leverage, we didn't talk about it today as one of the main pillars, but one of the things that we really do like to leverage within organizations is a peer-to-peer group, right? And a team lead can really be that great peer-to-peer group. So it's somebody that a newer sales rep or any sales rep on the team can kind of go to. They're not in a management role, right? They're purely responsible for sales themselves. But that can be, it can be good for the team leader because it is a bit of a job path, and it gives them, especially people who like this, who like to train and like to share their ideas with others, it can be really motivating, but it can be a real great asset for sellers. So we do see this a lot, especially in call center operations, but even other sales, more traditional sales operations, where you have team leads and a manager of people. And so that way you have that kind of peer-to-peer network that somebody can work with.
So let me ask then another question we got, which I think is really relevant to this, is what are some of the most common mistakes you see sales leaders make?
Most common mistake I see sales leader make, it really has to come back to what I just talked about, which was coaching. When we look at high performing organizations, we look at, what's unique, right, around this sales organization to that sales organization. And there's many factors that we look at, but always what bubbles up to the top is this idea of being a developmental organization, having that kind of like growth mindset. And sales leaders will all admit that coaching is important. But when we look at the reality of the day-to-day operation, we find that there's no time for coaching. So people say, I want to do it, but I don't have the time. So I think that's probably one of the biggest mistakes I see leaders make, is being too directive, not carving out time for coaching, making sure that there's a process for it, there's a system for it, and also that you're developing your managers. Just like sales is a skill where you have to, ask questions to discover needs, relate to people, present solutions, overcome objections, negotiate, all of those kind of skills. Coaching is just as much of a skill as selling, and many sales managers have got promoted because they were great at sales. So a lot of them have, the sales skills, they did really well, great, you get promoted into sales manager. Well, now as a sales manager, you have a whole different skill set that you need to be effective at your job. There's some overlap, but now you need to understand how to coach. So as a sales leader, you want to make sure that you are training your managers on being consultative coaches, right? On being developmental, having great coaching conversations, how to identify coaching issues, right, within the organization and how to solve for those. So it's really carving out that time, making that investment, developing a coaching culture. It's one of the biggest things that we see sales leaders, make the mistake of.
Let's move on to the technology piece. CRM, great enabler, also sometimes the bane of salespeople, depending on how well it's been set up and executed. So one of the questions we got is, when first launching a CRM, what best practices or tips do you suggest?
Yeah. CRMs can be a deep topic. So certainly understand this question and why you'd want to get an answer here. A couple things. So first of all, for the best practices, when you implement a CRM for the first time, every CRM has some sort of design, and out of the box, they're going to have their sales flow or their sales process flow and, things that they're tracking. One of the biggest mistakes that I see sales organizations make is they pick a CRM and then that becomes their sales process and that becomes their sales flow. And what you need to do is develop your sales process first, right? And again, going back to customer journey, make sure you understand your customer journey, develop a great sales process that aligns to that customer journey. And then when you add CRM as a technology, you customize the CRM stages, flow, steps, gates, KPIs, all of that. You customize that to your sales process. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen a sales organization pick a CRM and then whatever that out of the box sales flow in, that becomes their sales process. And that's a huge mistake. That's what I would do first.
So a follow-up question from Linda, who asked a question earlier, and along the lines of this technology track and implementing technology to support your sales process and your sales team. Linda asks, how do you suggest tracking engagement? What are your salespeople actually doing? And as a leader, how do you suggest implementing that?
Sure. Yeah, well, that's the great part of CRM, right? Where you can get some of this data. Try not to make it too heavy on the admin side, right? Because obviously we want sellers selling. But at the end of the day, you can track activity, right? You can track activity for the normal things that a sales rep needs to do, from logging a call, attending a setting a meeting, sending a proposal. So all of the things that they need to do in the sales organization and through the sales process, if you enable that in the CRM, those things are happening in the CRM, right? And it's not extra work for the sales rep to do it, it's where they do it. And sometimes that requires integration of systems. That's why I said CRMs can go deep, and your organizations are constantly looking to integrate and adopt and automate whenever possible. But if the normal tasks that a sales rep needs to do live inside the CRM, that's where they do it as a system, well, now you have all that data. So now you have that activity data so you can make sure that people are engaged.
So sometimes you'll come across resistance to new technology or technology process changes. How do you create buy-in from the team for new tech implementations?
Sure. Yeah, because salespeople rejecting change or resisting change never happens. Right? It all just goes smoothly. Yeah. The best advice I give here is any change that you have inside a sales organization, you need a strong change management plan. Right? Just basic change management principles are really important. So one is communication, making sure that's communicated to them on why we're doing this, how this connects to our larger mission is really important. Visible senior leadership support. Make sure that the most senior people in the organization are communicating this and it's visible that it's important to them. Great training so people know how to do, what they do. And then tracking, obviously, the adoption of that. And also the good news is if you look at any change management studies and best practices, the good news is you don't have to have everybody on board in order to make it successful, right? You need to identify some of your early adopters. So who is adopting that technology early, recognize those people, get those people to share some of their success stories, communicate those success stories, because people want to see that others in their role have had success with this. But then you move into the people that maybe didn't adopt right away, but now that they've seen a little bit of success, they start to adopt. And of course, you're going to have all the way at the end, you're always going to have some percentage of people that are your detractors that are late adopters. But the good news is if you can get most of the organization on, get your early adopters and get your movable middle, as they call it, get those, focus on those people to adopt the technology, and eventually it'll pull the rest of them through. And that I do see that as a problem and as a pitfall that many sales leaders make, is they start to focus on the detractors first, the people that are most resistant, and they're spending a lot of energy and time trying to get them involved. You're better off focusing on your early adopters, your movable middle, getting most of the group on, so that way you have momentum that can carry you through. So focus on those people, and then just implement a strong change management plan to help with adoption.
So we've answered questions about forecasting and competence and profit and CRM and engagement and all these different types of activities and things that can be measured in KPIs. So what KPIs, and this is probably a question that could be in its entirely own webinar, but what KPIs should matter most to a sales leader?
Yeah, so the actual KPI is going to vary from organization to organization, and depending on B2B, B2C, you're going to have different KPIs. So the KPIs that matter most, I would say, is making sure you have a comprehensive set of KPIs, right? So that includes your leading and lagging indicators. So really something that I spoke to earlier in this workshop. Many organizations have lagging, so they're looking at the outcomes. So they're looking at closed sales, number of new customers, average deal size, close rate, things like that. But not a lot of organizations will look at leading indicators, and leading indicators are really important to manage too, especially in complex sales and especially so in long-term sales environments, like long process sales environments. So you want to make sure you have a good mix of both. Have your leading indicators and also have your lagging indicators. And leading, don't make them just activity. Right? So a lot of them will be like number of calls or minutes on the phone or number of presentations, but look at some ratios of effectiveness. So that means moving from one stage to the next. So if stage one of your sales process is X, stage two is Y, what's the ratio between those two? And as you see dips in those ratios, either at a team level or at an individual level, that can be really helpful for sales managers to dig into, right? So maybe that individual needs some help in, positioning the value proposition initially during prospecting calls to create interest, right? So that needs to happen in order to get stage one and stage two to happen at a higher rate. So those, when I think about KPIs, it's not about every sales organization measures the same thing. Every organization will be a bit different, but you want to have a good mix of your lagging and your leading to really have that comprehensive look, but to have managers to be able to coach and develop people to things that they can do something about instead of after when the sales lost and just apply to the next deal.
Okay, I like that answer. We've only got a few minutes left here, so I'm going to move into a few questions we have around interviewing, maybe just time for one more here. So what can I do in the interview process to ensure I'm hiring the right people, even if I have clearly defined the role?
Great. Yeah. So the first step is to do just that. Clearly define the role, understand the competencies that are right for that role. And then I think as you're interviewing, of course, you're going to have, behavioral interviewing techniques I think are really important for sales. So you don't want to just ask somebody, hey, can you do this? Right? A lot of people that are good interviewers or anybody wants to say, yes, right, to those things, but their ability to do it may be different. So I think you have to use some behavioral interviewing to really see if they can implement, like, how would you respond to this kind of scenario, right? Give them a scenario, see what kind of response they would have, and or just looking for evidence of exceptional ability, right? Looking at previously seeing some evidence of success. And then finally, I would recommend, we offer this here at Janik, we recommend this to a lot of our clients and even other assessment partners, but to use an assessment as part of your hiring process, especially if you're hiring in a high degree and a high number. There's a lot of science that's been done on these validated assessments, and you can create some great benchmarks really tailored to that person. So you look at your group and you look at, okay, who are my high performers? You assess those, you get some common traits within the assessment. Then you have people, and this isn't, you may not use this on every person that you interview, but maybe your late stage interviews, right? The last like 2 or 3 to help you make a decision. You have them do the assessment, and this assessment product can give you that score, right? To what degree do they match this particular profile? So it's another data point that you can use. And in our assessments, we also provide some behavioral based questions for the interviewing manager to be able to ask if there's a low rating in any of those categories. So it helps you kind of dig in a bit more. So that can be a really great tool, especially if you're hiring a lot of people. Use that assessment tool as part of your hiring process.
So this is, talking about bringing in new salespeople. How about identifying potential leaders from within your current sales organization? How do you advance and grow people who already know you've already hired?
Yeah, absolutely. Identifying those high potentials is something really important for any sort of sales leader, to have progression. You want to identify those people that are showing those initial capabilities that perhaps could be moved on into developmental tracks. We also recommend developmental tracks for high performers to help, create some leadership and create some bench strength. And again, the assessment product that we talked about in talent audit can also be a great way to do this. You identify those high potentials, you put a cohort of those together, and you start to put them through a track, perhaps help getting them exposed to other areas of the business, consulting arms, learning and development, et cetera, to really well round out those group of high performers, as those will be your next group of leaders.
All right, thanks, Justin. We're just coming up on time here, and I know I'm trying to manage all the different questions. I know there are a few that we didn't quite get to, so I think we can come back to those later. People, participants, if you feel like your question wasn't answered appropriately, we do have a copy of the chat that we'll download and reach out to you if possible. If you don't hear from us, you can email info@janik.com, and we'll be able to reach out to you that way. Justin, any additional thoughts before you sign off here?
No, thanks so much. Thanks everyone for attending. Really appreciate it. Always love talking about this topic. Sales leaders, near and dear to my heart. So thanks so much for joining, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. As always, great presentation. Great to hear from you. Quick reminder to everybody participating, you will be receiving a video recording of this link. So look for that in your email tomorrow. You'll get a copy of this. You'll also have a link to our white paper, How to Be a High-Performing Sales Leader in Today's Marketplace. A lot of what Justin talked about, you can find those references and support for that material in there. 2 last recommendations. If you want more of this content, if you want to keep abreast of Janik's thought leaderships and events and webinars like this, please go to LinkedIn, follow Janik's LinkedIn page. And while you are there, Justin, I recommend that people connect with you directly. Justin is a great thought leader and a great person to have in your network. So please take the time to do that. Again, thank you to all of you who joined us today. I know your time is at a premium. I appreciate you being here and spending some of that time with us and investing in your own professional development. So thank you all so much. Enjoy the rest of your day.